So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Just a Chat webinar, The Last Commons, a final reflection before the journey, and the journey being a review of each one of the chapters through a webinar in the last, what is it called, Jeff? The Last Commons, I think that's what it is, featuring starters today with a brief chat with Jonathan Schaeffer. Over the past several weeks, we've been exploring a question that sits quietly beneath many of today's technological debates. What happens to personal agency when intelligence itself becomes industrialized? Artificial intelligence is advancing at extraordinary speed. Large language models now generate answers and recommendations and even decisions that increasingly shape how people learn, how they work, how they communicate, how they shop. For some, this is a remarkable expansion of capability. For others, it raises deeper concerns. Who owns the knowledge? Who controls the data? And what happens to individual judgment when intelligence is centralized inside vast computational systems operated by corporations for which we have little influence at a national or other level? Today's conversation touches directly on these questions. In fact, we had a rich conversation we should have recorded during our foreplay before today's session. But our guest is Dr. Jonathan Schaeffer, founder and CEO of Insatiable Software. Many of you know and will know Jonathan as one of Canada's most accomplished computer scientists. A professor at the University of Alberta for most of his career, maybe all of it, and he helped lead the team that created the first computer program to win a human world championship in a game of intellectual strategy. After decades at the forefront of computing and artificial intelligence, Jonathan might easily have stepped away in retirement. But as most of us know, that's not what we do anymore. And instead, he did something quite different, although not that different to the most of us. Concerned about the direction of many AI systems were taking, particularly the growing dominance of large centralized language models, he began exploring a different path. That work led to the founding of Insatiable Software and the development of Kind, K-I-N-D, a system built on a simple but powerful premise. Put people's knowledge first. Put people's knowledge first. Rather than harvesting data to feed massive centralized models, the approach allows individuals to create and control their own knowledge base, with the AI then built around that knowledge. In short, you create the data and Kind creates the AI. How original. The goal is not simply more powerful software, it's safer, more accurate AI that strengthens personal agency rather than weakening it. That makes Jonathan an ideal person for the conversations we've been having, I guess for some of the values we've been sharing, and that we're about to have over the course of the next, 10 webinars. In a moment, I'm going to ask Jonathan a few questions about the times we live in, about AI as both opportunity and risk, about the concerns many people have regarding the current trajectory of large language models, and about the possibility of building systems that respect human knowledge rather than replacing it. But before we begin that discussion, Jonathan, welcome. I think everybody can see you here on the screen. And before we start, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself and why, even in retirement, these concerns about the future of AI remain strong enough that Kind has become your passion. So, over to you, Jonathan.
Well, first of all, thank you, Perry, for the opportunity to talk on this forum, and thank you, everybody, for joining in. I've been a professor at the University of Alberta for over 40 years. A fabulous experience. I'm wearing my University of Alberta shirt today in honor. And I've been working in AI. I love AI. It's what got me into computing science. But I've changed directions. Over the last few years before I left the university, doing the same thing over and over again just had lost its excitement. AI wasn't the exciting thing that it used to be, but there was a part of AI that I had really not a lot of experience in that became much more interesting about 6-7 years ago, because I could see the potential of what was happening with what we now call large language models. We all think of ChatGPT coming out on November 30th, 2022 as being a milestone, but there were earlier versions of the program that were quite impressive, and seeing them immediately opened my eyes as to what the future would look like. And in large part, it's been realized. So in 2021, I started a project to build the kind of AI data system that I wanted. And it started as a skunkworks project, me just working on something that I didn't even have research funding for. It was just something I wanted to do, scraping together some money for summer students and building it. And then ChatGPT came, and the urgency for developing this project became even more important. So, November 2024, I formally retired and left the University of Alberta. And people said, "Oh, you're retired." And I said, "No, I'm not retired. Retirement isn't for me. Reinventment is for me. I wanted to reinvent myself." So, I've reinvented myself as an entrepreneur. I purchased all the intellectual property for this product that I was developing called Kind. I now own it. I created a company called Synsera, Synsira, Synsera.com. Thank you, Randall. And transferred the intellectual property to the company. And on February 9th, the product went live and people are buying it. And there's a free version and a commercial version. So that's my history. So I'm a full-time entrepreneur now. But let me give you some of the background. There are things happening with AI that really bother me. And I'm just going to say the one thing that most people talk about when they think about these chatbots, these large language models, and that's hallucinations.
Mhm.
The word hallucination offends me. It anthropomorphizes these programs. Oh, it just made a hallucination, as if like, oh, it was just a little mistake. No, it's a fabrication. It's a deception. It's a lie. These programs are making up things rather than admit that they don't know. But what you need to understand is that these large language models are sophisticated text completion mechanisms. Given a certain set of words that you've said, it predicts the next word. There's more sophistication to that. If I said, "Hello, how are," what's the next word? In most cases, it'd be, "How are you?" And that's the way that they work. When you look at the models, you discover that there are fundamental problems in these models. Accuracy is one of them. Believe it or not, security is one of them. Safety is another. These are problems that are not going away. You want to get rid of them, you need a completely different model. So these large language models using the technology that we have today are amazing at what they can do, but they're only a stepping stone, an imperfect, flawed stepping stone, perhaps to a new technology somewhere down the road that will be much better without these flaws. Some of these flaws, you might say, "Oh, I think they're almost gone." They're only gone because they're masked, they're hidden. I'd like to say that these companies like Google, like Anthropic, like OpenAI, they use band-aids. The fundamental models make mistakes, have problems, and they apply band-aids to cover up the real problems. The problems aren't being healed, they're not going to go away. And so the purpose of Kind is to address some of the problems that I believe are fundamental today and are unacceptable. Accuracy is one of them. I'm a scientist. I deal with accuracy. I can't write a paper where I start fabricating facts. Last year, no, a year and a half ago, I ran a biography of me, and guess what? Apparently, I wrote a book called Lee Harvey Oswald, A Computational Approach. What? That doesn't even make sense. It took me a lot of work to figure out why I wrote a book on Lee Harvey Oswald. It's because in 1965, somebody named John Schaeffer, a lawyer in Washington, wrote a critical review of the Warren Commission report that said that Lee Harvey Oswald was the sole shooter in the Kennedy assassination. It's nonsense. I don't want that. I gave a talk a few weeks ago where I put up my bibliography from ChatGPT, and people said, wow, that's incredible. And then I pointed out every single line that was wrong. But people in the audience didn't know. They'd never met me. They accepted everything that was there as fact. That's wrong. AI should be accurate. And if it doesn't know, it should do something so revolutionary as to admit that it doesn't know, but it won't. So accuracy is important. Privacy is another issue. I'm sure you all know that there are lawsuits going on right now against all the large LLM providers. Data scraped off the internet has been used to train these models. Um, I use in a book, I've got a book coming out in a couple of months that's an introduction to AI, where, for example, a poem. It's amazing, a Robert Frost poem. When you put in a few keywords, the LLM comes back with almost the exact same Robert Frost poem that it created and authored. Who wrote this poem? Oh, I did, says the AI. Well, it's plagiarism. There, the data has been stolen. It's being used to train these AI systems. These AI systems have fundamental security flaws in them. You don't know that because you're not doing anything insecure. But there are bad actors out there who can take advantage of these systems to embed in queries things that will cause the AIs to do bad things. My point is there's lots of things that are wrong with these AIs. So we built Kind as a way of addressing them. And Kind is a desktop system. It only uses your AI. Sorry, it will only use your data. It answers questions only from your data. It cites the facts in your data to give it the answer. If it can't answer a question, it says, I don't know. There are no security flaws because you cannot manipulate its security features. There are no safety issues. You cannot make it, exhibit racist behavior and go off the deep end. We've put a lot of thought into building a system that's personal, private, does what you want it to do in a safe, secure way. How radical is that? Actually, it's perfectly normal. But in today's very strange age of large language models, what we're doing is different, and it shouldn't be different. The attributes we have in our system should be the norm, not the exception.
That's
End
a
of my
great beginning.
rant.
That's a great beginning. I mean, I think I tried to echo much of that at the beginning. And when we were chatting earlier, we chatted about whether or not the changes that are underway are welcome by our institutional and professional structure. And I think one of the indicators has been some of your own frustrations. And I don't wish you to, have to reveal your scars or how you've been treated or mistreated. But at a societal level, how serious is the change that's underway? We have been echoing for some time that we're actually seeing a change in our age where knowledge is becoming commoditized, whether or not it's accurate or otherwise. If people think that it's not about God anymore, it's about reason, and if it's not about reason anymore because it's become commoditized, we've got to find something else. Are we seeing a fundamental change in our society? Is this that significant?
The answer is yes, but how significant it's too early to tell. And I'm not trying to be cautious there. The first thing you need to understand is that there is no precedent for what's happening now. We've had technological revolutions before, many technological revolutions before, but they have played out over many years. they've also played out in limited sectors, if you will. If you think of nuclear bombs from the 1940s, that was a technological revolution. We realized there were risks. It took several decades. We put in nuclear treaties. Um, the world hasn't blown itself up yet, fortunately, even though there are a few bad actors. And we've now deployed the technology largely in safe ways, such as NMR, nuclear magnetic resonance medicine, and much safer nuclear reactors, etc. You can say the same story about any other revolution, technological. We can talk about steam engines, we can talk about computers, we can talk about the internet, cell phones, whatever. But AI is different. It differs in two things. The first is part of my mantra, which is AI and X. Choose your X.
Hmm.
Anything. AI in chemistry, AI in physics, AI in writing, AI in and society, AI in marketing. Put in any field there, and AI is going to impact it. So it's not narrowly siloed like nuclear is. It's going to affect everything. The second thing that makes this unprecedented is the speed. With nuclear technology, we had decades to figure it out because the only people who could build nuclear bombs were governments with millions or hundreds of millions of dollars and access to uranium and the top scientists in the world. AI can be built by anybody at their desktop, the individual. The code is open source. You can do anything. You can build something impressive really quickly. You can build something destructive really quickly. The problem we have is that society in general, government in general, corporations in general, everybody fundamental to human nature is resistant to change. And change can happen slowly, and we've seen that with all the previous technologies. We do not have the luxury of time with AI. You can resist it, but that is a hopeless strategy because the only way we are going to deploy AI for global societal benefit is if we do something like just radically improbable, like get the entire world to work together on putting in boundaries and safeguards and deploying AI in a safe, responsible, ethical way. I'm sorry, I'm veering a bit off topic from what Perry's question
I mean,
was, but
you've drifted right into one of the things I wanted to probe a little bit. Your focus is very much about allowing me or us or I as individuals to survive without all of these, being exposed to all of these risks that have not yet been incorporated into the tool that we've been given. It's like fire on fire. Um, are the institutions ready to embrace change? Are they prepared to adapt to provide the proper defenses for the people they serve? I mean, you are in a way a pioneer saying we need to recognize that individuals are at risk, and you're doing something in the interests of the individual and may in fact be threatening the institutions. Are our institutions ready to embrace and play a leadership role in this transition?
let me give you one story that perhaps illustrates this. The year is 2017. The government of Canada organized a cross-country trip because they were proposing an AI Data Act. And there was a session at the University of Alberta where two government representatives were there and several University of Alberta people, and we were asked to give feedback on this. And I listened and listened. I didn't say anything.
Hmm.
And at the very end, the vice president of research turned to me and said, Jonathan, I've known you a long time. I've never seen you this quiet before. Do you have something to say? And I said, well, yes, in fact, I do. And so I had the floor and I said, I turned to government people and I said, so you're proposing this AI Data Act. I'm glad to see that you're having it, but I just want to understand some logistics. So you're doing this cross-country consultation, right? Yes, yes. Great. And it's going to last several months, right? Yes. And then you're going to go off and write up the act, and that's going to take a few months. So it'll probably take a year or so. Great. Okay, good. And then it's going to go and be reviewed by committees, etc., right? And adding more and more time. And I said, well, the liberal government at the time, when's it, term expires? Is it all going to be done before that? And I said, oh no, 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 it'll go into the next term. And I said, so then, if the liberals lose, if the conservatives come in, then it's a different agenda. They may or may not want it. And they said, yeah, that's possible. So, it was 2017. And I said, well, so when do you think this will come into effect? He said, oh, 2021, 2022. So, okay. So I said, your Data Act is trying to address problems that exist today. And maybe in 2022, it's going to be legislation that will help us solve problems that are already more than 5 years old, but will
Right.
not address the problems that will have arisen in the interim. So, why do we want to be reactive to problems today that we're not going to address till well into the future, when in fact what we should be doing is proactive and understanding what the problems are going to be in 5 years so that we can start writing the legislation today so that the problems don't occur. And the response was, that's not how governments work. So
That's a,
I'd like
that's a
to point
defense.
out that
That's a
Canada
defense.
did develop an AI Data Act. It was tabled in Parliament in 2024. It was incomplete in that it was more like a framework as opposed to full legislation. And when the Liberal government um, shut down Parliament in January last year, the Data Act died.
Mhm,
So it's now 9 years, almost 9 years since I had that meeting with the government, and we still have no Data Act.
mhm.
And yet AI and the concerns have escalated, and we are ill prepared to deal with them. So we have serious problems. We're not prepared to work at the speed that is necessary to address these problems. And I, as an individual, can be outspoken, but I can't address the global, national, international problems. That's for the politicians. But I can address the things at the local level, the individual level.
Yeah.
And that's where I think it's important because all of us don't want to be what the big US corporations want us to be, which is um, data sources for them. These large language models are insatiable for data. Massive amounts of data, massive amounts of computing. That's why globally you're seeing trillions of dollars being spent on data centers. So these people can churn the data, build newer and better and bigger models to serve everybody. That's not sustainable. I don't want my data in there. I want my data. I want to use the data for me, my purposes, my benefits, without the disadvantages, without the risks. And lo and behold, if you think about it, it just makes sense. This computer that I'm using right now, do you know how capable my computer is? It's got a
Hmm.
high powered CPU with multiple cores. There's a graphics processing unit. There's an AI chip. There's a mind boggling amount of memory, a mind boggling amount of disk. I have an incredible amount of computing resources on my desktop.
Mhm.
And for most of us, I'm looking at everyone at this room, your computer is 99% idle. So why shouldn't I use my computer and realize the value for all that expensive computing hardware that you paid for and you're using right now or underutilizing right now? Instead, people put their data into the cloud so these companies can train on it, use it, and all the computing for it happens in these big data centers, which encourages the proliferation. These data centers are power hungry, they're water hungry, they're environmentally um, terrible. You've made the investment in the computing infrastructure, you've made the investment in your data. Use your resources to mine your information for your benefit, nobody else's.
So you walked right into sort of the conclusion that we've arrived at over the course of the last few months, and that's the relevance of personal sovereignty, of taking more and more responsibility for ourselves in light of the promises, in light of not appreciating that there are threats out there, of the trust we have or don't have in the institutional structure, not just to keep us safe, but to be timely. I think you've touched on a critical and absolutely essential point. The infrastructure that has been built over the last 5 years of government, universities, schools, the whole knowledge of the professions is all not just in jeopardy, it's too slow to satisfy the appetite of the consumer, which leaves the consumer looking for other alternatives. And they're sitting in their hands as the promise is AI says, I can do better than all of that. I can be faster. If you engage in critical thinking, I can be more accurate. I can do so much for you as your partner. I am the match of fire.
Look at I there's one thing that I think that um, I need to get out, and I'm not saying this is original, but this is my opinion. When I talk about AI, I don't talk about artificial intelligence. I like to think of AI as augmented intelligence. I want AI to be a tool
Mhm.
to augment, enhance, improve
Right.
us, the individual.
Yeah.
And I use AI to make me a better scientist, to make me, in my case, I collect books, a better book collector. I use AI as my assistant. I just wrote a book. I use AI to help me not write the book, I wrote the book, to help me find things, find ideas, find different ways of explaining things, fixing my grammar. Fixing grammar is an AI thing that we don't really think about as being a big thing. I use it as my graduate student or my articling student or my internship student or my whatever. And that's the way we should think
John,
about AI.
I'm going to talk. Who are you in competition with? The thing that makes your product and makes you original is that you are not an institutional thinker. You are demonstrating a genuine concern for, quote, the individual. How many of our systems are respectful of personal sovereignty as opposed to exercising control in their interests of power, votes, or profit, or eyeballs?
Well, there's two ways of answering. First of all, where the money is, it's not in personal agency. It's all about migrating to big corporations. Um, but clearly, there are a lot of people who value privacy, who value accuracy, who value safety and the security, who value individuality. And but that's not where the money is. And so I'll be blunt. If I was in this game to make $1 billion,
Mhm.
probably going for the desktop personal market is not the right strategy. That said, of course, I would love to make $1 billion with this product, but um, this is not the path. This is not the path to getting rich quick, and I hope is going to make a difference.
So was this, I don't want to call it passion, uh, this readiness to embrace the market of the individual as opposed to the power of profit, the power of votes, the power of eyeballs. Was there an epiphany? Was there a moment where suddenly your fear of the large corporation, the unresponsive institution, or was there a moment where the signal happened?
There was a moment, and I can't remember the date, but it's easy to find. The Guardian newspaper in the UK had AI write an opinion piece. This
Uh-huh.
is pre-ChatGPT in November 2022. And it came out beautiful and eloquent. Behind the scenes, of course, what they did is they had it generate multiple opinion pieces and they chose the best one. And just like any opinion piece, they quote edited, unquote, and it came out impressive. And it was stunning to me. I mean, I knew what people were doing, but to see this piece, even with the caveats that I just explained, it was impressive. But I also knew that these models that they were using needed data,
Mhm.
insatiable data. And it wasn't much of a leap before you realized these companies would do anything to get data. And hey, I'm guilty of supplying these companies data too. My mail is in Gmail. Maybe it's been trained. I use, say, Amazon.com. I would buy things. That's data. Every time I go out there and I purchase something, that's data. Every time I go and surf the web, somebody's gathering data on me. It was an epiphany in that I could see the future in that these systems would be much more powerful. I didn't expect ChatGPT in November 22 to be that good. Um, but understanding what these things could do and their need for data made me very concerned.
Well, that was a great point of wrap up. I'm looking for yellow hands now, and I'm going to ask Randall. I'm going to have to back out for a minute. I've got some caretaking, but Jeff's got a question. If you can handle the yellow hands going up for a minute, I'll be back in a few minutes.
Sure. Jeff, you have the floor.
Jeff Kramer first, I guess.
Hey,
Dr. Schaefer, I think that
First of all, nobody calls me Dr. Schaefer. I'm not a professor anymore, so it's Jonathan, please.
okay, Jonathan, I believe I may have reached out to you in 2022 in the spring via LinkedIn, and I had some questions about doing an AI program that would do like welding procedures and be
Yeah,
able.
yeah. I remember.
Okay. So at the time, you said that AI wasn't at the point where we could do all of those things. Have you changed your mind? And would your program be the kind of program that could uh, kind of take on those kind of
The
applications?
answer is yes and no. First of all, the second one is easy. The answer is no. Kind, I'll call it a generic tool. Uh, we have deliberately not customized it with any application specific knowledge. So you put in data and it analyzes, it doesn't understand, um, the needs of a medical doctor or a lawyer or an accountant, or in your case, it was welding data. It doesn't do any kind of particular data analysis. But your question, the first question about have my opinion of AI changed? Yes, because uh, I've made many predictions in the past, and most of the time I'm wrong. So never trust a prediction I make. But I'm going to put that with a caveat because if you look at my predictions, they're generally right, but the time frame is wrong. And so the kinds of things you want to do, I believe AI can do now. In the last 2 to 3 years, literally, and I keep talking about ChatGPT November 30th, 2022, as being a watershed moment, and it is. It wasn't a technological breakthrough. That breakthrough happened in 2017, but getting into the public in such a visible way and dramatic way actually upended everything. The amount of money that's gone into AI research is phenomenal. Hey, if I was doing this research now I would be swimming in money with grants, but that's not what I want to do. But the advances that we've seen since then have been incredible across the board, like unbelievable advances in almost everything to do with the fundamental AI technology, and therefore the kinds of problems that you wanted to address are doable now. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Jeff Ulich, you're on mute.
Okay. Thanks, Randall. And thank you, Jonathan, for your comments as you started here. I'm so delighted when I hear knowledgeable people like yourself describing these systems as basically as word completion systems. And I wonder what percentage of the general population understands that to the extent that they need to. Have you got a sense of that?
No, I don't. But when I give talks on AI, I actually show them how the fundamental algorithm, how it works. And when people see that, they're just blown away because they say, how can that possibly work? Well, on the scale that you and I think of, it doesn't. It can't. It's
Right.
stupid.
Yeah.
But if you ingest virtually the entire internet, which is billions or trillions, I don't know what the number is, of web pages, literature, content, value add, everything, and you process it, you get an incredible word completion tool that does amazing things. And then you add in all these, I call them band-aids, and many of them really are band-aids, but some of them are much more sophisticated than that and really are making a huge difference. And the ability of these tools has just gone up enormously. And the problem right now, just to put this, going back to my previous comments and put this in perspective, we just had the Olympics. So let me use an analogy. You want to get to the finish line first. It's a race. And in this race, we have Google and Meta and OpenAI and Anthropic, the big multi-billion dollar companies. Why them? Because they've got the budget to be able to do this. But the problem is they'll do anything to get to the finish line, which means they're all on steroids. They're all ignored. They say that they're addressing, but they are all largely ignoring the problems with these technologies.
Right.
And the net result is it's a gold rush. Whoever gets there first is going to reap the biggest benefits or market share or whatever their metric is. But they're leaving in their wake all these problems that need to be addressed if we're going to handle this. So the technology is improving in leaps and bounds.
Thank you. Another question I had for you is, how is it? I looked on your website and I see that your closed system in kind is powered by Gemini in some respect. Now, and I'm just trying to wrap my head around how you do that within a desktop application to protect users' data. Doesn't that likewise expose it to the outside world in some sense?
Yes, so that's a great question. So most of the computing happens on your desktop. Most of the things you do, your data never leaves the laptop, your desktop or laptop. However, there's one function in particular that causes problems. I'm looking at you right now on the screen. I can see you've got I guess a mustache, hair. I can see your white shirt. There's a bookcase, books on the bookshelves, pictures, a door, ceiling. I can see that picture really well. You're looking at me. This is my wife's office. You can see me, bookcases, wallpaper. You can probably even see there's birds on the wallpaper.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing image recognition, which is absolutely phenomenal. I think an important part of a user's data, pictures. The ability to do a detailed, thorough analysis of an image requires a massive data set, something that I can't put on your desktop. I mean, I can do image analysis on your desktop, but it's going to be poor. It's going to say, oh, there's a man in a room with a bookcase, okay? As opposed to there's an older looking person wearing glasses and a sweater in a room which has uh, wallpaper with birds on it and a black bookcase with it'll give you the full details. So what we do is we acknowledge it. It's in our privacy statement that in this case, we can't do it on your laptop, on your desktop. The quality is not there. And therefore, images get sent out to a large language model for analysis. In this case, we use Gemini. We've used ChatGPT before. We switched to Gemini because we think it's better, but we can switch if another one is needed. But we do it in a privacy-preserving way in that, first of all, everything coming out of you is encrypted and anonymized. It goes to Google and is handled in a privacy-preserving way where it only goes into the LLM and then it is removed. We just take the results and back. And we have a signed agreement with Google about the privacy. So that happens, and it's all documented on our website. For some people, that's not good enough because it's not 100% privacy. And so we're offering this trade-off in that we do it in a privacy-preserving way. If you don't have pictures that you want analyzed, you're okay. But we feel that pictures are too important for people. And it's interesting that some of our biggest users want it because they want the detailed understanding of their photographs.
Okay.
And
Thank
by
you.
the way, we don't support this right now, but we do have the ability to do in-depth analysis. We handle videos as well, but we only do it from the speech, all in a privacy-preserving way. But if you want, in a future version, we'll enable it. We'll analyze videos like frame by frame or minute by minute, so that you can say, "Hey, I've got all these videos. Is there a video of my daughter's 4th birthday?" And we'll bring up the video and right at the scene where the 4th birthday party happens. But again, you're not going to be able to do that on your desktop. But all the other functionality has migrated to the desktop because you have an amazing amount of computing resources at your disposal. Anything to do with images, it's not there yet.
Okay.
Great question. Thank you for that, Jeff.
Yeah.
Kevin, your turn.
A couple of questions. When you talk about AI hallucinations and whatever that means, I'm wondering, is there any equivalent? My understanding of that process is that AI tends to want to fill in the blanks of stuff that it doesn't know. Is there any equivalence in your mind to the process of filling in the blanks to the human propensity for filling in the blanks based on cognitive bias? My question is there an equivalence? I mean, humans, we all have our biases, and even in when we build prompts or what have you, unless we're very careful, our biases will be built into some nuances of those prompts. And I'm wondering if there's any equivalence in your mind.
Yeah, absolutely there is. There's huge bias built in because these large language models are based on training on the internet.
Mhm,
And the internet is fundamentally biased.
mhm,
And you have no knowledge of how these large language models were trained. There is no oversight. There is nothing that these companies are required to do to tell you how they were trained. You could have a model which has been subtly trained to ignore certain sites and favor others. And there have been accusations that some of these exist. There's one company who, in particular, has very clear biases that are well documented. And although the owner of that company claims otherwise, the statistics are overwhelming that it's being manipulative. But the other thing is that there are bad actors out there who understand that these programs train from publicly available internet data. So they have a vested interest on creating pages of information which reinforces, say, a certain political opinion. And they have no problem creating hundreds or thousands or millions of such pages with that content. And what happens with these large language models, even if they're trying to be fair, they'll say, oh my goodness, um, this fact is so common on the internet, it must be true. We could say that Jonathan Schaeffer is Prime Minister of Canada. And if you create a bot that creates hundreds and thousands of pages that say Jonathan Schaeffer is the Prime Minister of Canada, guess what's going to happen? You're going to start seeing that, quote, fact, unquote, start popping up in innocent questions.
mhm,
And so the answer to your question is there is implicit bias because of the internet. There is explicit bias because some companies are manipulative in what they use for their training data. And there's bad actor bias because some companies are feeding these engines information knowing that these engines willfully ingest this information and treat it as valid as any other web page that they've ingested.
So how do we then, as consumers of AI, um, uh, become mindful of our own biases, or leverage our biases, or what have you? But is there not some sort of best practice around how consumers of AI should approach AI to not only get um, uh, the most objective response to their queries, but to get the least biased response to their queries?
So the answer is there's no good answer. So let me qualify that. So, first of all, we desperately need some sort of auditing facility. Any AI product that's out there that has trained data, you should be required to document what the data is, what your sources are, and how you did the training, and have an independent body come in and validate it and
Mhm,
test it for things like deliberative, deliberative or um, accidental biases.
mhm,
So I would love, when I was young, I remember seeing all these ads for something, the Better Business Bureau. I had a Better Business Bureau stamp of approval, something that said, hey, this is a company or a product or something like that that has a stamp of approval on it that somebody has vetted it and said it's okay.
mhm.
We don't have that,
Right.
and we need that. Now, when I use one of these chatbots and get back an answer, the problem is that usually when I ask them, I have a pretty good idea what the answer should be, and therefore the chatbot um, validates my thinking or helps inform my thinking. You should never accept what comes back as fact. You should always check it, especially if you're going to use it professionally or externally, because you could be very embarrassed by using something that's factually wrong. When in doubt, I use multiple chatbots. I ask them the same question. And it's surprising sometimes how different the answers will be. I was running some experiments last week where I gave some questions to, I used ChatGPT and Gemini, and um, on these questions, probably about half of them, both of them got right, and about a quarter of them, ChatGPT got wrong and Gemini got right, and a quarter of them, it was the reverse. And so I often use multiple chatbots and look at them and see what the validation is. I, I believe that the big companies are largely not being manipulative. That doesn't mean they aren't biased. They are biased, just fundamental because they're using the internet data. But there's at least one or a couple of tools out there that you can use where when you ask a chat question, it actually sorry, it sends the query to multiple large language models, gets back all of their answers, and amalgamates them into a consensus type of view. And maybe that's a better way to go in that it's least effort on your part in that you get the smorgasbord of multiple opinions mashed together, but maybe that's uh, maybe that's not the highest quality answer. I haven't tried one of those myself.
I'd be very interested, Jonathan, to have this discussion with 13 young people versus 13 older people who are more critical, likely to curious about what's right, what's wrong. I mean, we don't allow kids to use fire without parents having taught them the risks of
I'll,
fire.
I'll,
They
I'll tell you a
get
story, Perry. This is a great sorry, this is a great story, but it's a terrible story. It's a sad story. This was my last term of teaching, and this is one of the reasons why I left the university because I didn't want to teach anymore. A quarter of the students in the class um, I failed them. And why? Because they were taking the lazy approach and using the tools, ChatGPT, and they didn't learn anything. But one of the cases was quite eye-opening. I gave my midterm exam, and uh, because of things like ChatGPT, you had to use it. It was done electronically, but with all other external connections disabled. Students got the marks back, and the student came and saw me a few days later and said, "You marked this question wrong." And I said, "What's wrong with it?" He said, "Well, you marked my answer wrong." And I looked at the question and I worked it out. And I said, "No, no, no, you got it wrong. Here's the answer, and your answer is wrong." He says, "No, I had prepared for this with ChatGPT, and ChatGPT gave me this answer. And here I've got the screenshot. I can prove it." And I said, "Well, okay, you just learned a valuable lesson.
it.
Your mark is 0."
Yeah, good lesson. Jeff, we're getting near bewitching hour. Got another question or comment?
I had a question, and I wanted to peek under the hood of Kind a little bit, if we could.
Sure.
You did explain the handoff to Gemini for the visual processing, which was great. But is this run? Are you running on your desktop a local large language model or small language model? And is it a RAG system, or how is it doing what it's doing, from what I understand from your
So the
website?
answer is yes. It's a RAG system.
Okay.
For people who don't know what a RAG system is, it's basically um, every time you add, uh, if if one of these large language models discovers new data, they don't retrain the whole model.
Right.
And so what they do is they gather all the data together, and then eventually, periodically, they'll retrain a model. It's too expensive to keep retraining a model. So what a RAG system does is it says you're going to analyze your data, in this case locally, and provide information. And you have all that information. And now what you're going to do is use, in this case, the local information with a large language model. And what we do is say, we're only using a language model to construct coherent sentences.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you ask a question, we go through your data, find all of the facts that are relevant to answering it, and then we ask a language model to take those facts and compose them into an answer.
And is that a open source LLM?
Yes and no. The current model actually uses Gemini in a
gem.
encrypted format and anonymized format.
Okay.
So it's privacy preserving.
Okay.
We have played with local models, and we will release a version that is local model only. And the only reason why we don't ship a local model right now is because that requires a very large data set. And on the ones that I've played with that are good, I don't have enough disk. I mean, my disk is full. I've got pictures, I've got files, I've got all sorts of things. I just don't have enough storage for it. And so this is part of the problem we have, that
I'm going to ask you a question, Jonathan. I think we're getting to wrap up about the engine. I'll call on you in a
sorry,
moment.
Jeff, I hope I answered the question. So actually, there's two things that we use Gemini for. The pictures, absolutely of necessity, but to compose eloquent text, and that will be available as a local version, but many people won't use it because you won't like the data requirements.
So my question to you, Kevin will be next, Jonathan. I'm very interested in the emergence of individual markets, that people will recognize there's a market for what you're doing. How are you marketing? How are you letting people know that individual and personal sovereignty is something that they should be buying?
Well, in part, you can see it on our webpage, but I know what I don't know. I'm a technology person.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm a CEO now, but okay, I've run the faculty of science. I ran the IT at the university. I know how to run a business or an organization. That's great. Do you think I know anything about marketing? Sales?
Okay. Okay.
No.
Okay.
So the biggest expense in my company isn't people.
Right.
We've hired a high-profile, successful marketing agency to work with us. And so in the last few weeks, I've been on 5 or 6 international podcasts. I've written 5 or 6 opinion pieces which have been published, all of which talk about kind.
Yeah.
There's some advertising that's going out. I believe it starts next week. I've used my contacts to email people.
Mm-hmm.
Getting the message out is actually very hard. It's a big world, it's a noisy world, and how do you rise above the fray? I'm not qualified to do it, and therefore you got to spend money to get the message out, and we're spending a lot of money to get the message out.
Well, you've echoed a point that we've made repeatedly, that knowledge without relationships has no value in the commercial market. Marketing ultimately becomes everything. To have a great product, which you do, I mean, from our perspective as it relates to personal sovereignty, you're right on, you're timely, you're exactly what we need. But how to get that message out, it's almost market formation, which is high risk and expensive. But brilliant that you look for a supplier. I'm going to call on, I think there was more. Kevin, you had a question, but I see Greg's got his hand up. Greg.
I was just going to mention, Jonathan, real quick. Marketing is the lifeblood of every business on the planet.
Yeah.
Building awareness, generating leads. That's
Yeah.
the toughest part of any business. If you understand your product, you know how to sell it. There's no shortcuts in that. It's tough.
Okay,
And
Kevin,
guess
your
what?
turn.
Yeah. So briefly, you spoken previously about institutions having, difficulty in adapting and whatnot. What are your thoughts on, it seems to me that even your previous world, the academic world, is perhaps slow to react and lacking agility in terms of developing some, I guess, best practices and whatnot around AI. What are your thoughts around that? Are the institutions able to really serve that purpose, or who in the world is going to be able to create those I guess roadblocks or guardrails?
Okay, wow. There's no short answer here, so I'm just going to plow into it. The University of Alberta has put out guidelines, but quite frankly, AI is revolutionizing education, and we don't know how yet fully. I want to go back to my young days when I was in math, I loved math, and then something came out, a little black box that could do math for me. They had this funny name called a calculator. And it was cool. I could do all sorts of neat little calculations on my own. But I couldn't bring it to school. It was banned. And for several years there was a fight, resistance to using calculators. And of course that battle was fought, and technology won, and calculators were adopted into the curriculum. And you can't be a scientist or an engineer these days without thinking of using a calculation, a tool like a calculator or a computer. But we lost something. I've talked with a lot of kids, and their math skills are woeful. I've seen people say, I ask them a question, a simple math adding question, and they'll bring out their phone and type it into a desk calculator because they just don't have that critical thinking. Math is something that we just give to the computer. I don't need to know how to multiply two numbers. I can just give it to my calculator. This is the problem that I fear right now. We don't understand ChatGPT and its ilk very well. We are being asked to make a revolution in education very quickly. And it's not just at the university level. It goes all the way down K to 12 and literally K. And what I'm afraid of is that we're going to create a generation of young people who know how to use these tools, but lose something in the ability to do critical thinking. Because humans are lazy. We take the path of least effort most of the time. What's the answer to this question? I'll just type it in. Oh, okay, that's the answer. I'm going to put it in my essay or my submission or whatever without critically thinking it. And this goes to the individuality that humanity is where it is today with all the incredible things that we've built because we have individual thinkers who can think critically and originally. And there's a real danger that we're going to become lazy and just use the technology as the answer as opposed to a tool that we should use. It's a hammer, it's a saw, it's a desk calculator, it's a tool that we are going to use to augment and enhance us. And the moment we become lazy and let it, in some sense, do the thinking for us, we're in trouble. And that's my opinion. And I don't think education has fully got its head wrapped around this. And it's going to start, it is starting at the university level, but it has to percolate all the way down. And I don't have answers other than to know that time is of the essence and we need to figure out how to educate people using these tools in ways that maintain the skills that we expect people to have.
Well, at one time it was learning how to pray in order to get to heaven.
Yeah. I guess my question is the follow-up question is, what do, I suppose and it's a big question, what do institutions have to do to become agile in order to adapt to the new, I guess, the realities of, call it the cognitive revolution or what have you?
That's a good question. The answer is I don't know. Um, I'm not trying to skirt the issue because I have done some thinking about it, but I've been out of the university for a year and a half, and I've seen some of the stuff that the university's doing, which is guidelines. And I'm sure that there are much more in-depth discussions going on within the university, but I'm not aware of it. The problem here is that it requires urgency and it requires multidisciplinary people working. It's not just educators, it's English teachers, it's technologists, it's everybody addressing how do we do this. And you can't do it in isolation at the university level without thinking about how the consequences are going to be um, throughout the whole system. It's like,
But Jonathan, the systems today are talking about the consequences to their survival, not to the individuals. The answer, I
well,
think, to Kevin's question is until the institutions, whether it be universities or professions, begin to realize it's not about the supplier anymore. It's recognizing that they have to start figuring out how individual sovereignty gets developed and protected and supported as what their business was supposed to be all about, but instead it became control and preservation of the system.
well,
My
the
answer, without being
the only
cynical, is I don't think they can do it. And we're going to see an entirely new infrastructure in light of what is being triggered. And you may be one of the pioneers of trying to put one of the first products out there that
so we're only
preserves
talking
and
about.
develops the individual.
So I want to say Kevin's question is about education, and so I'm only thinking of the education system.
Sure.
AI is going to change many industries dramatically, and some ways of doing things are just going to disappear. But when it comes to education, the K to 12 and the university systems aren't going to go away. What they teach and how they teach it is going to radically change. And to be quite honest, there's a real potential that a lot of teaching is going to be done by AIs in the future. And I'm not saying that that's right or wrong, because clearly there are risks. But what I really fear, is that institutions always look at the bottom line first. And if AI can save jobs, these institutions will move in that direction. And I see it. There are a lot of companies who are cutting people, thousands of jobs being lost because of AI without fully understanding the consequences of those decisions, because some of these are actually short-term decisions. My fear with the institutions is they aren't putting the effort into really understanding the future so that they can determine the correct course of action today. And you're going to see casualties in the academic system. K to 12, mistakes are going to be made. But again, it's in part because this is urgent and it's a multidisciplinary, multifaceted problem that needs to be addressed. And again, they're incapable of doing something like this.
Well, the bottom line and wrap up to me is what AI is doing today is undermining the relevance of knowledge and enhancing the relevance of learning. And few of our institutions were selling learning. And that may well be our future. I know.
Be careful that you don't, I wouldn't say that AI is undermining knowledge. AI is generating knowledge too.
No, but I'm sorry, commoditizing, making devaluing the institutional structure that said we know and you don't, therefore buy our product.
Well, look, everything is going to change, and that really goes back to the fact that we are a change-resistant society. I'll give
There
you
we
one
are.
example that really bugs me. Uh, if you ever look at the statistics for autonomous vehicles, you can eliminate over 90% of the deaths, over 90% of the accidents
Yeah.
with autonomous vehicles. And yet, okay, they're not ready for Edmonton with blizzards and stuff like that, but in large portions of the world, autonomous vehicles could improve the quality of life globally by eliminating the world's biggest killer is car accidents.
Right.
And we could eliminate that, largely reduce it today with autonomous vehicles. And why haven't we done it? It's societal, it's resistance to change, it's government, it's insurance regulators. And every time a Tesla car kills a person, it's a news story. The fact that in Canada, probably every day 20 people die of a drunk driving because of a drunk driver is irrelevant. If a Tesla kills one person, it's a big story. We've got our priorities wrong. We should be deploying AI in ways that can improve society, and there are ways that we could be doing it right now, and we're not because we just don't have the DNA to do the right thing.
Well, whether we talk biologically or organizationally, the resistance to change is inherent in living organisms, and survival becomes self-oriented. And what you're talking about is the survival skill in the future is to sustain and maintain and develop individual sovereignty is being sacrificed at the altar of the professions, the institutions, and those that have proclaimed in the past they knew and you didn't. They're the ones at risk.